The year 1918 was marked by a devastating outbreak of influenza that swept across the world. This pandemic, which is commonly known as the Spanish flu, was the most severe and deadly epidemic in human history. It infected about one-third of the global population at the time, which was around 500 million people. The exact number of deaths caused by the Spanish flu is unknown, but it is estimated to be somewhere between 20 to 100 million. The Spanish flu was not only deadly, but also unpredictable and mysterious. It affected people of all ages and backgrounds, and it often caused severe complications such as pneumonia and bleeding. And in the midst of a resurgence of the COVID-19 virus, here on Mind Over Matter, let's take a look at history and see how the world was affected by the Spanish flu, a global tragedy that changed the course of history and left a lasting impact on the world. Here are 10 facts about the 1918 Spanish flu. It struck in 3 waves across the world. Influenza, or flu, is a virus that infects the lungs and breathing system. It spreads easily when someone who has it coughs, sneezes, or talks. Tiny drops go into the air and can be breathed in by others nearby. A person can also get sick by touching an object that has the flu virus on it, and then touching their own mouth, eyes, or nose. The world has already seen a deadly outbreak of the virus in 1889, but it wasn't until 1918 that people realized how dangerous the flu could be. The pandemic of 1918 had a mild first wave in the spring of that year. People who got sick had usual flu symptoms: cold, fever, tiredness, and often got better after a few days. The death toll was low. The pandemic had a very deadly second wave in the fall of 1918. People who got sick would die in hours or days. Their skin would turn blue, and their lungs would fill with fluids, making them unable to breathe. The average lifespan in the United States dropped by 12 years in 1 year. A third wave, less severe, came in the spring of 1919. It was over by the summer. Number 2. Its origins are unknown to this day. The flu of 1918 was first seen in Europe, America, and some parts of Asia, and then quickly spread to every corner of the world in a few months. No one knows where the specific type of flu, the first pandemic caused by the H1N1 influenza virus, came from. If COVID's origins were traced back to bats in China, some people think that the virus came from a bird or a farm animal in the middle of America, moving from one animal to another until it changed into a form that affected humans. Some say the center was a military camp in Kansas and that it spread through the US and to Europe by the soldiers who went east to fight in World War I. Others think it started in China and was carried by workers going to the West Front. Number 3. Despite the name, it did not come from Spain. The 1918 flu did not come from Spain, even though it was called that. The British Medical Journal gave it the name Spanish flu because Spain suffered a lot from the disease. Even the King of Spain, Alfonso XIII, got sick with the flu. Spain did not have the same rules for hiding news about the war as other European countries, so people thought that the flu came from Spain. That is why they called it Spanish flu. But Spaniards gave it another name, the Naples soldier. The German army had a different name too, Blitzkatar, and British troops called it Flanders Grip or the Spanish Lady. Number 4. There were no drugs or vaccines to treat it. Doctors and scientists did not know what caused the flu or how to cure it. There were no good vaccines or medicines to fight the deadly virus. People were told to wear masks, not to shake hands, and to stay inside. Many places were closed, like schools, churches, theaters, and businesses. Libraries stopped lending books, and people were not allowed to go out in some areas. Sound familiar? There were too many dead bodies to handle as well, so they were put in temporary places for the dead. Hospitals were full of flu patients. Many doctors, nurses, and medical students got sick too. The war had made it worse because there were not enough doctors and nurses to help. The first flu vaccine that worked was made in the US in the 1940s. After that, vaccines were made regularly to stop and prevent more flu outbreaks. Number 5. Young and healthy people were more at risk. Usually, flu only kills young, old, or weak people. Today, flu is very dangerous for people who are younger than 5 or older than 75. But the flu pandemic of 1918 killed healthy and strong adults between 20 and 40 years old. Many of them were soldiers in World War I. Strangely, children and those with weaker immune systems did not die from the flu. The oldest people had the smallest death rate of all. Another possible reason why the 1918 flu killed young adults is that they had been exposed to a different strain of flu virus in their childhood, which gave them some immunity against that strain, but not against the new one. This is called the antigenic sin hypothesis, which suggests that the immune system tends to respond to a new infection with antibodies that are based on previous infections, even if they are not very effective. This may prevent the immune system from producing more suitable antibodies that could fight off the new virus. Older people may have had some exposure to a similar virus in the past, which gave them some cross protection. Younger people may have had less exposure to any flu virus, which gave them a naive immune system that could adapt more quickly. Number 6. The medical profession tried to play down its severity. The Royal College of Physicians said in 1918 that the flu was not more dangerous than the Russian flu that happened in 1189 to 94. The British Medical Journal agreed that packing people together on transport and at work was needed for the war, and suggested that people should quietly put up with the nuisance of the flu. Doctors did not understand how serious the disease is and tried to make it seem less scary to avoid making people nervous. In Egremont, Cumbria, where many people died, the medical officer asked the rector to stop ringing the church bells for each burial because he wanted to keep people happy. The newspapers did the same. The Times said that it was probably because of the general weakness of nerves called war tiredness, while the Manchester Guardian mocked protective measures, saying, "Women are not going to wear ugly masks." Number 7. 25 million people died in the first 25 weeks. The flu epidemic got worse as the second wave of the autumn came. Most people died within 3 days from bleeding in the nose and lungs. International ports, usually the first places in a country to get infected, had serious problems. In Sierra Leone, 500 out of 600 dock workers were too sick to work. The disease spread quickly in Africa, India, and the Far East. In London, the virus changed and became more deadly and infectious. In 3 weeks, 10% of the people in Tahiti died. In Western Samoa, 1 out of 5 people died. Every division of the US Armed Services had hundreds of deaths each week. After the Liberty Loan Parade in Philadelphia on September 28th, thousands of people got sick. By the summer of 1919, the people who got sick either died or became immune, and the pandemic finally ended. Number 8. It reached almost every single part of the world. The 1918 pandemic affected the whole world. It made 500 million people sick all over the world, even those on faraway Pacific islands and in the Arctic. In Latin America, 10 in every 1,000 people died. In Africa, it was 15 for every 1,000. In Asia, the death rate was as high as 35 out of 1,000. In Europe and America, troops traveling by boat and train took the flu into cities from where it spread to the countryside. Only St. Helena in the South Atlantic and a handful of South Pacific islands did not report an outbreak. Number 9. The exact death toll is impossible to know. The 1918 flu epidemic is thought to have killed 20 to 50 million people around the world. Some people think the number of deaths was even higher, up to 100 million people, which was about 3% of the world's population at the time. But we cannot know for sure how many people died Because many infected places did not have good medical records, the epidemic killed whole families, ruined whole communities, and filled up funeral homes around the world. And finally, number 10. It killed more people than World War I combined. The 1918 flu killed more American soldiers than the First World War did. In fact, the flu took more lives than all of the battles in World War I together. The outbreak made the strong immune systems of the soldiers work against them. 40% of the US Navy got sick, while 36% of the Army felt ill. The 1918 Spanish flu epidemic was one of the deadliest events in human history, affecting the whole world and killing millions of people. The epidemic had lasting social, economic, and political impacts on many countries and regions. The 1918 flu epidemic is a reminder of the importance of public health measures, scientific research, and global cooperation to prevent and control future pandemics. Thank you so much for watching the video. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel if you like the content you see here. Until next time!